Good evening. Welcome to the special city council meeting of September 11th, 2019. We have a quorum. I will call this meeting to order. Clerk, would you please read the procedures for public speaking? Comment?
Yes, sir. Individuals wishing to speak on agenda items must complete a sign-up card and present it to the clerk prior to the item being introduced. Sign-up cards are available on the table in the council chamber. Comments made under public comment must relate directly to the agenda items. No sign-up card is required. And citizens will be given 3 minutes to speak on the agenda items.
Thank you, Clerk. Is there anybody that would like to say an invocation? I don't see anybody. Please join me in a moment of silence and in your prayers, if that's what you're doing. Please remember the people who lost their lives at 9/11. Please join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Manager?
Yes, sir. Two public hearings are required by state law to adopt a millage rate and budget by taxing authority levying a millage rate. The first public hearing, tentative hearing, is advertised on the notice of proposed property tax trim notice mailed by the property appraisal. The final public hearing will be advertised within 15 days of the adoption of the tentative millage and budget. The final hearing must be held within 5 days, but no less than 2 days after the advertisement appears in the newspaper. During the public hearing, the first substantive issue discussed shall be the millage rate necessary to fund the budget and specific purposes for which the ad valorem tax revenues are being used. The millage rate and the budget must be tentatively adopted, then finally adopted at an advertised hearing by separate votes. The City Council shall hear comments from the public regarding the proposed tax rates. 4 ordinances have been introduced for the first reading with respect to the final adoption of the proposed FY 2020 budget. One adopting the millage rate for the operation of the city and the voted debt service millage rate on Series 2005 general obligation bonds. One adopting the general fund and related budgets of the city. One changing the charges for services of the Solid Waste Utility Enterprise Fund, and one adopting the Enterprise Fund's Capital Improvement Program budget for the city. One resolution has been introduced for the first reading with respect to changing the charges for services of the Water and Utility Enterprise Fund. The tentative operating millage rate of 8.2443 mils, which is 10% above revenue neutral rolled back rate of 7.4951 mils. The voted debt service levy is 0.03463 mils, is a reduction of 0.0179 mils and 41.60% below the maximum levy authorized by the Series 2005 general obligation bonds of 0.5930 mils. What we're going to do tonight is conduct the first public hearing on the city's proposed budget for FY 2020. The city attorney will read the ordinances to adopt the tentative operating and voted debt service millage rate. He'll read the resolutions adopting the schedule of fees for water and sewer, and conduct the first reading of ordinances proposing the FY 2020 solid waste rates and adopt the tentative millage rate for the enterprise and capital budgets. City attorney.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, sir. Ordinance number 31, 2019, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, providing for the millage for the operation of the City of Titusville and voted debt service levy for fiscal year 2020 and providing for an effective date. Ordinance number 32, 2019, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, adopting the general and related budgets of the City of Titusville for the fiscal year 2020 and providing for an effective date. Resolution number 47, 2019, a resolution of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the schedule of fees for water and sewer service by increasing the charges and rates and providing for an effective date. Ordinance number 33, 2019, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending sections 16-116 of the Code of Ordinances by amending and establishing an increase to the residential monthly charge for solid waste and recycling fees, and by amending 16-117 of the Code of Ordinances by amending and establishing an increase to the commercial dumpster and commercial can monthly charges for solid waste and recycling fees, and increasing the commercial dumpster rental fees, and providing for an effective date. Ordinance number 34, 2019, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, adopting the Enterprise Fund and Capital Improvements Program budgets of the City of Titusville for the fiscal year 2020 and providing for an effective date.
And staff has a presentation. You have hard copies on the dais itself if you'd like to follow along. And we have the Assistant City Manager, Tom Abatai, and our Finance Director, Bridget Clements.
Okay, as we begin the first public hearing, the first slide at the beginning just kicks off what the city managers just explained to everybody. Goes over the timeline and the proposed millage rate of 7.7210 mills, and then the debt service millage rate. And this just kind of outlines the hearing process. The millage rate that we've proposed in the city manager's budget is 7.7210 mills, which is 3.01% above the rollback rate. And again, during this public hearing, we'll be discussing this millage rate and how we're going to be spending this, and how we propose to spend this $462,000 in extra dollars. We've also approved a tentative millage rate of 8.2443, which is 10% above rollback, and that yields an additional $1 million over the proposed budget. And we've also will be giving you all some options as to how you can spend that money if you choose. The proposed millage rate is $462,000 over the rollback rate, and we propose to spend those dollars in the following ways: hire 3 new police officers, and then some of the associated costs that come with these police officers to include equipment, training, debt on to buy them 3 police cars, and then body cameras for the whole police department, not just for those 3 officers. This slide just goes over again the strategic goals and objectives for the 2020 budget. And then these next few slides just reiterate the budget priorities that y'all have seen in the budget workshop and throughout this budgeting process. And you'll see that all of these objectives we have addressed at some point in the budget. So some of the highlights include a 2.0 cost of living pay adjustment. We will continue with our planned 6.6 miles of road resurfacing. There will be an increase in employee paid and city paid healthcare premiums this year. We've tried to keep that as low as possible. And then we are proposing to contribute just over half of the OPEB contribution to the trust fund. And this highlights some of the capital items that we're addressing. We're continuing to address the Indian River Lagoon and replacement of essential vehicles and upgrades and other essential infrastructure improvements. This next slide is a millage rate comparison of the city of Titusville with some of our peers in the county. It's sorted on the proposed rate, which is what we published in our budget. The tentative rate sorts similarly, and the tentative rate is the rate that y'all approved at the end of July. So if you notice on here, we are actually third. If you just look at the raw rate, we're third highest. But if you look at the per capita, we're actually, which is the next slide, the per capita rate, we're actually the third lowest in the county. When you take the total taxes that we're levying at the proposed rate and the tentative rate, and you divide them by the population of the city. So these next 3 slides just will give you an idea of 3 different scenarios with the tax house. And so if you look, only one of these items, City of Titusville, or what we control with our taxes. The rest of the tax bill is really controlled by the county and its taxing districts. So based on the 7.7210 mills, which is the proposed property rate, An average house in the city of Titusville will be paying about $795. If you look at the current millage rate of 7.9517, you're looking at $818, which is about a $22 increase over the proposed millage rate. And if you were to take it to the highest level, which is the tentative rate, that's the 10% above rollback, you're looking at $847, which is $74 above the proposed tax rate. So that's just to give you some perspective of the three ranges. When we went, at the budget workshop in August, we had expressed to council some additional funding considerations, and the three items listed here, we are proposing to be funded by extra state revenues that came in after we published the budget. So we would like to, for a 2.5% pay increase instead of a 2%, so it'd be an extra 0.5% for general fund and all the other funds, and then some security for City Hall. Those could be done without increasing the millage rate. This next slide, at the workshop, y'all asked us to come back with a list of priorities that could be funded at the current millage rate of 7.9517. So these are the lists, and these are listed, I think, in priority order for the city manager. So you can see the funding that we would need, and then the impact on the millage rate to the side that each of these individual items would have on the tax rate if you so chose to do these this way. And these last couple of slides are other funding considerations, and it's just the an additional 0.5% pay increase to bring us up to the 2.5% for the enterprise funds. Also, the other additional pay increase would be to bring us up to the 3.0. We showed them separately because for general fund, they're funded separately. You don't have to fund them together. And then the impact of an increase in the OPEB contribution if you chose to do that. So that's just the impact of those items on the other funds. So tonight we're asking you to tentatively adopt the operating millage rate of 8.2443 and the voted debt service of 0.3643 mils to fund the debt payments on the river acquisition bonds. The city attorney has already read the ordinances and their resolution. And again, here are our recommendations for the evening. And this concludes our presentation.
I think we need to hear from the public, though, first. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
We have two cards, Russ Bosch.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I think a long time ago I've spoken to City Council about another issue, but this was.
Sir, if you will, your name and address for the record.
Oh, sorry. Russ Bausch, I live at 3685 Audrey Drive in Titusville.
Thank you, sir.
I am acquainted with a lot of you, Attorney Broom, Mr. Diesel, you and I went to school together. Ms. Nelson, you and I worked at the State Attorney's Office for a number of years until we both retired. I've been a citizen, my family and I have been a citizen of Brevard County, Titusville really, for about 50 years. Ms. Stokel, I remember you when you were in the Titusville Playhouse with you and your brother David. In any event, hopefully everybody survived the hurricane. And the reason I'm here tonight, and I hope I'm in the right time in the right meeting, is because I got a notice from the property appraiser's office, like all of us did, that this was actually I think the hearing was scheduled earlier and we had to continue it. So in any event, basically what I'm here to do, along with my 87-year-old mother, is indicate our opposition to the sewer and the water increase. If I understand it correctly, it's a 1% increase. I think we could find a savings somewhere within the city other than assessing the homeowners and the citizens of Titusville that. Also, as far as the millage situation goes, and I wasn't totally familiar with that until the presentation, which was a good presentation, by the way. I think police, that's a valid consideration. I would definitely support that. But I think we need to look at some savings in other areas. I think the 2% raise really needs to be looked at. I'm in opposition to that for the city employees. I don't know if that includes council or not, but I would definitely be in opposition to that. Well, okay, I see you're shaking your head, so thank you for clarifying that. Other than that, just want to let you know that we are in opposition to most of the increases other than the police. I think that's an important issue, and the equipment that they need. I think that's a very important issue, and I worked with the police for 37 years, right, Ms. Nelson? So thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I would remind you all that we vote in every election, okay, our family.
Excuse me, sir, wait 1 second, please. Are there any questions of this gentleman? I see none, but I have one.
Yes, sir.
Why are you against the 1% water increase?
Well, because as I've indicated to you, we've lived here for over 50 years. I'm somewhat familiar with the Titusville issue with sewer and water. It's been a controversial issue for a number of years. And 1%, why are we passing that on to the citizens? Why can't the city? Listen, I worked in government for 37 years, okay? I think you can find the 1% savings somewhere in waste, in, over expenditures, but I believe you can find that somewhere else than asking the taxpayers, the citizens, to cover that. We've covered a lot of issues over the years with water and sewer.
Okay. How much is that per person? Oh, let me start off first off. It's not water that's been controversial, it's the sewer. You get them together.
Well, no.
Sir, let me speak and then you
Sure.
can speak. That was because you have lived here and you know that many years ago we had to build that plant. I've been here 40, almost 50 years now. Build that plant, and we had to overbuild it because we hadn't kept up with it. And so that is what caused the rates of water and sewer to come up. Our rates for water are pretty typical. We pass that on to the people who use it. Everybody uses water, and it takes a certain amount of increase. We have a study done every year. We don't hit everybody all at once. We do it incrementally so that nobody has to adjust their budgets to any degree. I think it's a very fair thing. I understand your position, but I do have to correct you. It's not the water that's controversial. It's the sewer. And the study is just to keep up with the cost of things which go up. So that's why we do it. Your turn.
Okay. As far as the water goes, all right, I'm aware of the fact that, and again, I'm not as versed in it as you are, but I'm aware of the fact that there have been water issues over the years. I know that at one time we were talking about buying water from Cocoa.
We did that, sir.
And there were some well fields
And
that weren't
we put
producing.
the well fields in, sir. I'm sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you.
Right. So, and the water rates, in my mind, when I've talked to people who live in other cities within Brevard County, Titusville is some of the highest, or has been at least some of the highest rates in the county as far as water goes. So, that's been a couple of years ago, so I don't know where we stand now. But let me tell you this, okay? Here's what I know about government, whether it's the federal government, the city government, the state government, which I worked for 37 years. Okay, the government never has enough money. They can always ask for, sometimes get, oftentimes get, and it's kind of like a black hole in a way. They always need more money, and they can always find ways to spend money. Okay, I know 1%. I think I looked at it. It was a few dollars. Okay, but 1%.
Sir, the numbers.
Yes.
83 cents a month, based on 5,000 gallons usage.
Okay, well, and 5,000 is about.
83 cents isn't worth us even arguing about, it's in my estimation, but if you want to continue.
Well, okay, I'm here to tell you or give you my opinion that how come the city can't find 83 cents? Why does it have to come out of my pocket?
Because you're using the water. I'm paying the same thing you pay.
I understand that.
Just answering your question.
Okay, but the city should find a way to fund that without carrying that on. That's part of what the city does, is provide water, provide sewer.
But we don't have to pay, we don't have the money to continue to pay for the increases that are necessary without raising taxes. We don't do it all at once. We do it minor amounts each year, so.
Well, there was an assessment that came yearly for the sewer, which I realize we're talking about the water. What I'm telling you is every year I see something increasing, okay? And granted, it's 83 cents, it's $1, it's, $20 here, $20 there, but every year it's the same thing. So, I mean, there's always an increase.
There's always inflation, so. And there's also additional costs.
And there's also belt tightening, okay? So.
All right. Anything else you'd
No,
like to say, sir?
thank you. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you
Appreciate
all
it.
very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Address that.
Yes, excuse me.
Russ, hang on. Mr. Stouffer is over there. At some point, I would ask that you sit down and talk to him. One of the things we talked about was, this debt service is going to go away. And at some point, we talked about increasing the water fees a little bit this year, and I think it's next year, and for the next several years, it sort of bottoms out. That was my recollection of it. So
Well, we spread it over.
I would ask that you sit down and talk to Sean about it. I will say that we've been really good about tightening our belts. And the problem is that we have let things go that should have been addressed. And so now we're at the point where these things have to be addressed. Police officers, public works, which is not exactly an appealing building, I guess I would say. You remember the trailers we were in?
Of course I do, yes.
Trailers look great. Kevin's back there. I hope he's not rolling his eyes, but our trailers looked really good compared to this. And so, at some point you have to say, okay, we're finally getting a little bit ahead and we need to address some of these things. Remember how the police department looked 20 years ago when it was over where SunTrust was?
Sure, I was in there many times on legitimate business, okay?
It's done
Remember?
professionally, sir, right?
Yeah, we were there professionally. But remember how bad that was? And you can't turn around and ignore that forever. So I guess what I'm saying to you, at some point, you have to say, we need a balance here. We don't want to go crazy. We don't want to build Kevin $1 million public works facility. I'm sure he'd take it. They're back there nodding. But on the other hand, you got to put some money into it, and you have to keep that balanced. So it's sort of a balancing act of what's good for our community, what do we really have to have, and how do we get there? How do we make everything fair for everybody? Because you and I would not have wanted to work at TPD way back then. I understand that the file room had a population of rats. I don't know that Public Works has rats, but, we don't want to get to that point. So it's sort of a balancing act. So I would ask that, you sit down and talk to Sean and sort of go over some of the figures with him.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that.
I don't, Sean's a nice guy. I don't think he'll mind.
I'm sure everybody's nice. Can I respond to?
Sure. Sure.
You and I both know that the county building in Viera that we both worked in for a number of years,
Oh, yeah.
okay, was no pleasure palace, all right?
They did some shortcuts there, it always seemed.
I mean, we were thrilled when they brought in the new urinals. I mean, that's how thrilled we were. So
I was still waiting for new carpet.
the point, the point that I'm trying to make is that you and I both know that there were areas that we saw that places could be cut, things could be handled more efficiently. I don't know how long you and I know how long I worked with the state of Florida without getting a pay raise at all. I mean, it was like 10 years or more before the state of Florida authorized employee pay.
I remember.
So, I'm not oblivious to, as you say, the balancing act.
Yeah.
But I also know that there are, in every government, there are ways to save, okay? And, government has a basic function to serve. Fire, police, roads, which I won't talk about the condition of Knox McRae right now, but anyway, those are basic services that the city needs to provide. And certainly I'm willing to pay my fair share to do that.
Yeah.
But when I'm hearing, 2.5% raises, capital improvements, those are things that need to be looked at. And in order to, not spend like governments, whether it's city, state, local, federal, whatever it is, we can all cut and we can all make cuts. So, I'm just asking y'all to have your staff or, you guys look at it, make sure that we're doing the right thing. I haven't changed my mind. I am opposed to the increases. And like I said, my mom is here as well. She doesn't want to speak, but she's here as well. And,
Can I say that we'll do the best we can?
And I would appreciate that, and we'll be watching.
Okay. That's a deal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next card, please.
Stan Johnston.
Good evening. Stan Johnson, 860 Poinsett Avenue. I have three issues. One is that we're supposed to be in a very good, not a recession, but business is doing well. Houses prices are increasing, and considering that, it seems that it's less than appropriate to increase the millage rate, considering that we're having additional income coming in. I know that you've done studies and so forth saying, hey, well, we need more money anyways. The second thing is similar to what the other person just mentioned, but I want to add to that as far as Public Works is doing, I think, doing fantastic. Water Resources has got big problems. You've got well fields that we got $10 million, over $10 million put into that well field over there on the south end of Titusville. And it's been resting and so forth. And we don't get enough, as far as I'm concerned, we get very poor accountability as far as why is it this way. And I've heard people saying to me, hey, it should have never been there. And so we've got, that's a lot of money, $10 million. That was just in the wells. So we've got a lot more than that, I believe, as far as water lines and so forth for that well field. And when I came here, the well field on our ridge the capacity was 6 million gallons a day, and that was said that was going to be, we expected to have it for just about forever. But then what happened is that we don't have a report to it, but I do find in what I've looked into is we've overpumped wells. Overpumped them bad. And when you overpump a well, you destroy it. So I've never seen a study that admits this, but I know this happened. I've seen it happen. And now we have a whole bunch of wells right there in the south end of town, haven't been producing. They haven't been pumping them because I don't know what happened, but we don't have a good answer to that. So I'm especially looking forward to someone getting that. The third issue I had is that that was especially about Water Resources. The third issue I had was is that if city's going to spend $70,000 on reviewing my correspondence, I would think that's less well, I'm not sure that was a well-spent $70,000 for someone to review my correspondence. And of course, I also question it. So I think you could get another engineer to review me to see what they come up with. Thank you.
Any other cards?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, we go to the vote at this point? Or we want to go to
Probably
discussion?
council discussion, sir. And,
Discussion?
On your slide presentation, page 16 is where the additional general fund funding considerations begin. And on page 17 of your packet is the items that council asked us to take a look at during the first budget workshop. So that'd be a good place to start, probably.
It would if I had a page 16. On there? Where is it? Oh, of the agenda, you mean? I thought you meant the packet over here. Thought he didn't.
In fact, if we could put slide 16 up, maybe that would help. Yes, sir, on the slideshow. I think you're probably going to have to scroll through it, Tom.
I went too far down.
So these are the items that we talked about during the first budget workshop, that we had $146,000 of additional state revenue that we did not build into the budget. So our recommendation to keep up with the cost of living is an additional 0.5 to make the pay raise for our employees to 2.5. There's no required millage to do that. And the security audit, as well as security guard for City Hall, is no additional millage either. So we talked about that, and I think council agreed with that. So on page 17, if you could, next slide. As at the workshop, these are items that were on the $13 million of shortfall items that we brought forward, and council suggested that we reconsider and take a look at these items. Now, all these will require a tax increase, and the associated millage rate to that tax increase is on the far right column.
I guess we'll open it up for discussion. I have one light lit, Member Stokel.
Thank you. Bridget, I had a question real quick first. With the budget highlights, you mentioned 5% increase to city-paid and employee-paid healthcare premiums. Mm-hmm. Do I take that to mean that we are, as a city, are having to pay more in healthcare costs, and employees are also going to have to be paying more personally, or just for their spouse or dependents? How is that looking?
So the city pays 100% of active employees' healthcare costs, so we'll be incurring that 5% increase on behalf of employees.
Okay.
And then we split 50-50 the cost of the dependent child care. So the employees will be paying a portion of it, but 5% only on their half.
Okay.
That they pay for dependents.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And then going back to our discussion, I guess picking up from the budget workshop, I am not a fan of raising the taxes. I think the city manager did a great job at building the budget as is. You guys know what I said. Since getting elected, a lot of us got elected for the first time together. We had to raise the millage rate just to cover costs. And I think the city manager's done a great job with cutting where it needs to be. Russ, I honestly agree with you on a lot of points, with the exception of employee raises. One thing that I've noticed since being on council and visiting different departments, when you value your employees and pay them appropriately and give them that freedom to then come up with new initiatives, new ideas, you see a lot more efficient work from government employees, in my opinion. And I think we're seeing that now by the city manager being able to still pay our employees, give them a little bit of a raise, while lowering our millage rate. I think we're in an excellent position right now. So that's kind of where I stand. I'd like to keep it at the 7.72, which is what it was built at.
Is that the correct number? Okay.
Yes, sir. The proposed budget is 3% below our current rate of 7.9517.
Okay, I just have a different number on there. Member Nelson?
I don't like to see us raise additional taxes. I think while we are in a good period, it is a time to actually do some additional work. We were talking about the Marina Park Trail renovation, the connection. It's $29,000.
No, that's just to clarify,
PD&E?
that's PD&E.
Okay.
So that's not a actual construction of a
That's
trail
for the
network.
plan
That's-
proposal.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
engineering and it's a study basically to design and take a look at. And this was a result of the Resiliency Committee. This is one of the recommendations. So you're not going to get a connection from Marina Park with $29,000.
Okay, okay. But I would also like to see us do a little bit of work on the Public Works complex. I've been in there, and unless it's really been spiffed up in the last year, it needed a lot of remodeling. So I would like to see us go ahead and fund some of that. Because I believe people should have at least the basics of a place to work. And I think that does as much for morale as anything else. I mean, who wants to go in to a place which looks like a dive and start working? If you have a nice work environment, or at least an acceptable work environment, I think it adds to the productivity. So I would like to see some funds going that way. And, you know, we're in a good spot right now for doing some of these things. Next year, we may not be in a good spot to do it. So my vote is that we do some of it now.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
City Manager, what is the plan for the Public Works? I know we talked about that in the workshop, and I think we all would agree it's unacceptable. When I got elected going on 4 years ago, we talked about it. I don't know that anything's been done since then. Can you give me a little update?
Yes,
on
sir.
that?
Actually, quite a bit has been done, so I'll have Kevin to fill you in on it.
Yeah, what we've done to date, we've collected money from mainly fleet solid waste to date. We have a new wash rack facility coming in for our heavier vehicles. We planned replacement through modular buildings of all our external buildings. We've already demolished our old streets office and stormwater offices have been removed. We redid our welding shop. The big ticket item is the garage, and that's not $1 million. That's probably closer to $4 million that will have to be raised and demolished. But we're going to accessory with modular buildings, all the crew areas, foreman offices, new things of that nature. But right now, due to some environmental issues, we're bringing in a wash rack for our garbage trucks to improve our permitting on our environmental side.
Okay, very good. I need to get back in there and see that. I appreciate that. Thank you, City Manager.
I would only comment, you've been here 4 years,
Yeah.
I've been here 14, and all of those years we've been trying to improve without a lot of results up to this point. So I would agree with both of you that we do need to continue on that.
And if I could add, Public Works facility is our number one priority of our facilities to renovate and improve. The police department is second. We have some renovations that we know we need to do there. And then City Hall, you're sitting here, you've seen the minor renovations that we're doing. At mid-year, City Council approved funding the renovations of the restrooms. So we are trying to make this facility work as long as we can, because this is a big ticket item. This will probably be a referendum, $10 to $14 million in the future.
1969, I believe, when we landed on the moon. Here we are. That being said, you just noted that, Member Nelson, that we may not be in this position again next year, and I get that. But at the same time, I'd be leery to increase the millage, and then perhaps we and maybe our community, God, I'm not thinking that, I'm not hoping that, but I don't want to stick people with a millage that may not stay with their employment. I'm overstating that perhaps, but what I'm getting at is I too like the idea of not raising taxes, holding still at 7.72 millage. I think that the budget is solid. It's safe. It's conservative. It covers everything that needs to be covered. It doesn't overextend us. And, again, as we get this trend of continuing to have prosperity, perhaps we do a few more of those things. I'm not here to say that I hadn't thought about what you said at the, as we ended the workshop. I said, yeah, maybe. And then the more I thought about it, the more it's like, let's stay pat, and let's stay conservative. And Public Works building bothered me, but I'm glad to hear what I just heard on that. But outside of that, I think I'm leaning to stay tight on the budget that has been put together here, and I feel solid and safe with that.
Member Nelson.
Well, given what Mr. Cook just informed us of, our city manager, I would tend to agree with you. I didn't want to leave them sort of out in the dark there. But if things are moving along and they're making it move along, then I have no problem with it. So.
Anybody else? Again? No? Okay. Next would be to start the adopting of the tenant.
Yes, sir. And just as clarification, we will move forward with the 3 additional items, the 0.5 pay increase, security guard, and security audit, which was at no increase to taxes. And then, sir, you can move on to adopting.
Tentative millage.
Yes, sir.
Do I have a motion?
Now, Bridget, you want the tentative to remain at 8.2
That's what yeah. That's
to
what I was
allow you
gonna-
flexibility all the way to the end of the
Oh,
budget
I'm sorry,
process.
yes.
That's what I was going to clarify, just to see. And traditionally, we leave it higher until we adopt the final budget at the second public hearing, just in case something happens in the next week and you all reconsider. Because if you set the millage, whatever you set the millage rate at today, you cannot go higher at the next meeting.
Yeah, this has been tradition. I should have mentioned that. Thank you. Historically, that's what we do. We put it up to the maximum allowed, but it will not stay at that point. It has not previously, let me say that. So that's,
So you want a motion?
yes, please.
So I would move to approve ordinance number 31-2019, am I right?
Well,
Say
you're tentatively,
setting the millage rate at 8.2443.
right, what we'll need a motion on tentative millage is, if that's your motion, is to adopt a tentative millage rate of 8.2443 mils, which
Right.
is 10% above the rollback rate of 7.4951 mils, and tentatively adopting the voted debt service millage at 0.3463 mils is
Okay.
what has been provided to you, if that's your motion.
I move to adopt a tentative millage rate of 8.2243 mils, which is 10% above the rollback rate of 7.4951 mils, and adopt the tentative voted debt service millage at 3.3463 mils. Does that do it?
Yes, ma'am. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote on this. Clerk?
Member Nelson,
Yes.
Mayor Johnson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Diesel,
Yes.
Member Stokel.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Next is the
Adoption of the
Adopt-
tentative budgets, which are contained in ordinances 32, 33, 34, 2019. And we'll need a motion to tentatively adopt the general fund, enterprise fund, capital improvement program, and related budgets in those ordinances as presented. And
I would like to say, when you adopt these budgets, you would also need to include the additional $146,000, or is it 146?
And those are those 3 items we discussed that have no
146,
effect on
yeah.
the millage.
Okay.
Did I have a motion?
that I would move to tentatively adopt the general fund, enterprise fund, capital improvement program, and related budgets and the ordinances presented, including the $146,000 for those additional items.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, let's do a roll call, please.
Mayor Johnson,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Diesel.
Yes.
Member Stokel,
Yes.
Member Nelson.
Yes.
Next item. I guess that we have to announce the date.
Correct. For the public, we need to announce the date for the final public hearing when you will adopt the final millage.
And
We'll adopt that the next meeting.
what's the date of the next public?
It's September 18th at 5:30.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
Yeah, you just have to announce it, sir.
Oh, we don't
Yep.
we don't need a motion on it? Okay, it's been announced. Say it one more time.
September 18th at 5:30 PM at City Hall.
It's September 18th at 5:30 PM at City Hall. Okay. Is there anything else to be dealt with this evening? I think.
Sir, before you adjourn, I would like to thank the staff who's in the back of the room. I've mentioned this before, but we worked really, really hard to develop a 5-year plan. And this budget is reflective of that 5-year plan, which will carry us into the next few budget years in good form. So I do applaud. It's a lot of work to put it together, but I think that the simplicity of this budget, as you suggested, is an awesome because of that team back there. So I thank them for that.
And I also want to mention that we, by state rule or state law, we are limited as to what we can do in millage to 10%, and we're knocking on that door. And we have to remember that if we ever run into a problem, we need to have a little wiggle room to work with. So that's one of the reasons we try and keep it as close as we can at this point. With that, if I see nothing else, we have completed our duties this evening. Thank you very much, staff, for what you have done and all the work you've done on it, all of you out there. I'll declare this meeting adjourned.